So we're going to be talking a lot about difficult times as well as faith.
Who am I without soccer? Who am I without these certain people? Who am I without this? And that's when I started to work on my own talents.
We don't always have our parents with us. And a lot of us are scared because we don't want to visualize that time where we're going to see our parents for the last time, and we don't want to imagine what our last conversation is going to be like. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Path Talk Show. So I want to introduce again my co-host Emmanuel Santoso.
Yes, it's good to be back here again.
So we're going to be talking a lot about difficult times as well as faith. So throughout our lives, we go through difficult times where we feel lost.
100%, yes.
And we want to be able to find ourselves by starting different hobbies or doing things that is necessarily not good for us. Have you ever been through those times yourself, Emmanuel, where you felt stuck in one period of your life where you feel like you didn't have a place of belonging?
Oh, many times. Even till this day, I still feel like there's a big part of my life that I'm missing out on. But when I first discovered that when I was lost, when I was stuck at somewhere where I didn't want to be, was during the time when I didn't even know that I was actually stuck. And during this time period, I was about 15 years old. And during that time, I made a lot of enemies. I've upset a lot of people. I've done some bad things that I shouldn't have done. And the biggest part was, moving away from my faith. And from there, that's when I sort of lost all the emotions for people, for family, and the biggest part with God. And, when I felt that, I didn't even know that I was going through this until I explored out of Australia, out of Sydney, right? When I went to go visit my brother over at Poland. And that's when it changed for me. And like I said, even till this day, there are some parts where I know that I need to improve on. There's some parts that I still need to fix about myself, my character, my personality, the way I handle my emotions, all these things that, are to be sort of considered. And, it is quite of a sensitive topic, but I'm glad to sort of express it out here on this podcast, on this talk.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like, especially if you're still going through the journey, it's like peeling a mandarin, right? You're just doing it layer by layer, and you find things like this take time
100%,
until you discover your truth and your authenticity.
Yeah, and the more you sort of find yourself into these positions, the better you get when it comes to handling it. You start to handle it more, how do I say, more professionally in a way. You're like, all right, I've been here before. All right, let me just do these strategies. Okay, this didn't work. Okay, let's go about this way. Yeah, look at it in other ways, right? And I think one big thing that we don't really apply into resolving these issues is first mentality, right? And emotional control, right? When the emotions get the best of us, then we lose control of the situation, right? Mentality, you got to stay on top of everything, right? Even if it hurts, right? That comes like discipline and, perseverance. You want to be able to have those traits into these sort of situations. And especially throughout the times where I've gone through difficult moments, when it comes through just life giving me hell, going away from my faith, right? Friends and family, upsetting my friends and family, those are the times where, all right, I gotta figure out how to.
How did that
get
make
back.
you feel, upsetting your family as well as pulling away from your faith?
I felt alone. I felt like I had nobody, right? And the only person that I had was one of my best mates, and I won't address his name, but later on, until I went to Poland, behind my back, he just completely removed himself from from social medias, from all my contacts, and he left my school as well. And, you know, even though I knew that he was going to somewhat leave, I didn't expect it to happen so soon, right? And that there was when I felt alone. And he wasn't really he wasn't sort of the best inspiration or someone to look up to. That's why I was doing the things I was doing back then. You know, I was misbehaving. I didn't have any goals in particular, no purpose, nothing, right? But yet again, if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't be who I am right now.
And what was the initial moment where you felt like you were starting to be pulled back into faith? I know you said you were going to Poland to visit your brother, and obviously I know that being a very spiritual place, and your brother is studying to be a priest back then. What was your journey getting back into it?
Well, getting back into it was actually quite a beautiful story, and it still gives me goosebumps till this day. And I did mention it in our previous episode with Isaac, when I went to Poland, right, with my parents. And when I went to Poland, my mentality, like the way how I looked at it, I was like, yeah, okay, it's good. Poland is just a different country, nothing much. But what I didn't realize is that the sort of environment, right, the people there, right, it was more the people rather than like just seeing it as like, oh, just on a vacation or anything. No, it was the people, right? So every day, like when we went to Poland, we stayed at the seminary where my brother was studying at, right? And over there, I was basically witnessing how seminarians would live their lives, right? They wake up early in the morning, make the coffee, like literally the coffee. All of them were their own baristas, yeah. They're all making coffee, so every time we wake up in the morning, we can smell like this, strong scent of coffee, yeah, pure, and that woke us up basically, right? And basically, witnessing the lifestyle of seminarians, that opened up my perspective on faith, right? It's like, these guys are willing to wake up, to go through their day, say their prayers, walk around the monastery saying the rosary. Like, that there was like the initial start, right? After exploring around Poland, right, every corner of Krakow, which was the city we stayed, was like a church. But this wasn't just the way the church was structured. It wasn't like just an ordinary church. This was a cathedral in each corner of Krakow. Like, it's so crazy. It's a basilica, right? And it was just so beautiful just to walk inside. It's very beautiful. It was breathtaking, right? And during the times of mass, the church was filled, right? All these people just come to church, yeah. All the seats are all taken. People standing, kneeling, on the floor. Like, it's beautiful. And on top of that, there were a lot of beautiful women there as well, who are fully invested into their own faith. And as a kid, when I was like 15, as a 15-year-old, I was shocked. I'm like, wow, beautiful women that are there in the church, all these beautiful families, and up in the altar, all these altar servers. That really sparked me up, right? That really sparked me up. I'm like, wow. Right. So after exploring around Poland, we went to Częstochowa. Yeah, I think I'm pronouncing it right. Częstochowa, right? And this is where Our Lady of Jasna Gora was based. Over there, my brother took in solemn vows, right? And at that monastery, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a monastery, right? When he was saying his solemn vows, right, I was there for mass, and it was beautiful. The whole monastery was packed, right? Everyone was there, witnessing the moment, yeah. And it was very beautiful. Yeah, it was a beautiful event, and that's when they exposed, the Black Madonna, right? And during that time when Black Madonna was exposed, right, everyone was kneeling, right? I was kneeling as well. And I was looking at the Black Madonna, at the Our Lady of Českova. And as I'm looking at it, I'm saying my prayers. And I'll be completely honest with you, she looked at me. Like, her eyes turned right onto me. And that moment right there, it made me, I got goosebumps, right? I started like tearing up, right? And because of that, I didn't know what to do. I was going through like a whole roller coaster of emotions. I was like, why? What's going on? You know? And then I started to look at myself in a third person, perspective. I was like, what am I doing? What have I done? Right? That moment there was the moment where everything changed. Right? So that was basically the start of everything, right? The start of my faith to actually grow, right? And then from there until the last day of me staying in Poland, when we were about to leave to go to Rome, my brother had a chat with me. And in that talk, I spoke about the things that I had questions about, right? And this was like, a brother-to-brother talk, right? This was a very deep conversation. And I mentioned about all of these things, about faith, about self-development, and all of that. And from there, he basically gave me a plan to execute when I go back to Sydney. And from there, I had that plan. I wrote that down whilst flying back to Sydney. I wrote it on my phone, and I executed everything, right? And that's why, that's how I became strong in faith, at the same time, to become this person who I am today.
It's great that you have a brother that fully supports you and helps you in your journey in faith, because I know him personally as well as obviously you're his brother. He can give you that mentorship that no one else can give you.
100%.
And he has a different understanding of faith by being able to study it as a brother as well as a priest. And I could imagine the amount of experience you've gained just through your brother alone, as well as experiencing through your other brothers as well. And how did you feel when you were reuniting with your family?
Like after Poland or?
After Poland.
Well, first, it didn't come overnight. Like instantly, like me and my family got along and all that. Not saying like we weren't in bad terms, but there was a bit of tension because I done some terrible things, right? So it took me a while to build up sort of that respect, right? For my brother Andreas, he was there with me like at all times, even at the times where I messed up, he was always there for me. So he was basically the person I looked up to, right? Coming back from Poland, there was a lot of things that I had to work on. I started reading a lot of books. The first book that I read and I completed reading, this was back in year 9, was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Mark Manson.
Yeah, Mark Manson. That was the first book that I read. And from that book, I learned so much to improve my confidence, to not care about what other people have to say about me, and to keep looking forward, to focus on yourself, right? And just try to tick off all the goals that you need to achieve, right? And that book helped me throughout year 9, right? From there, I started went to get a job. And because of me taking that action of finding a job, my sister and my brother sees like what I was doing. They saw what I was doing, and they saw that, I'm not the same guy anymore. I'm not that kid that just wants to muck around and, and play around with jokes and all that, right? Not to joke around. Like, I was taking my life serious, right? I wanted to grow, yeah? Even my teachers saw it as well. All my teachers, they saw like the difference. So until I got a job, I worked as a waiter over at Rachet's, over at Caramar. And that there, oh man, no,
I actually remember hearing the story of you wanting to start working there.
Yeah, I have funny stories over there as well. It was good though. Like, I enjoyed it, all right? And that was able, like I was able to apply the concept of the subtle art of not giving a fuck by Mark Manson into that job through the work environment, with just dealing with people, and just building up my confidence there, right? And that was a pretty good start, right? I left eventually because it's just too many politics I couldn't handle at that time, but it was good. It was really good. But going back to what I was saying, when I was trying to grow, right? When my teachers could see it, right? One of the teachers at my school, he was, I'm pretty sure he was, I don't know what he was, but he was like up there. Yeah, when it comes to like his authority.
Oh, okay.
He was up there, yeah.
So he's like one of the head teachers.
Yeah, well, head teachers, like the one that will, like, if you get in trouble, you see him, yeah?
Yeah.
He was intimidating, right? But when I looked at him, right, like maybe like before Poland, I saw him as a threat. I was like, oh crap, this guy's, he's gonna get me in trouble and all that, yeah? He's scary, right? After Poland, right, after doing, reading my books and going through this self-development journey, I looked up to him because I liked his confidence. I admire his confidence. I admired the way how he says things, right? The way how he takes initiative and takes action on the things that he's about to do, and the things that he says, right? So, yeah, at school, my teachers, they saw that I was improving, and they see that from the past, like I was misbehaving a lot. I was a troublemaker, right? And then during that time, when I came back from Poland, they see huge improvements. They see like, oh, this guy's not playing around. Maybe not like that, but like they can see it's like, oh, Emmanuel's up to something, So that there, even my teacher went up to me. He's like, you've changed a lot, man. You've changed a lot. He even spoke to my teacher. He's like, he used to be a troublemaker. This one, I'm not sure what's going on, but he's on a good path. I'm like, yes. That gave me, like, hearing that from him, like, was like, it was satisfying. I was like, yes, this is what I want.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah,
validation.
Exactly. It's kind of funny too, like, especially when you have a different perspective when you're coming back from, let's say, a trip like from Poland where you had that spiritual experience.
Oh, yeah.
Where you want to be able to grow and expand yourself as a human being. And that one person that you were scared of in the past, you look up to now because you come from a place of maturity. Where back then you didn't have that much of understanding compared to what you have back then, where you started to grow.
100%, yeah. And talking about maturity, yeah, like by the time I came back from Poland, yeah, that's when the maturity started to happen. And from there, my perspective on like my fellow classmates and my whole entire grade, I wouldn't say I was judgmental, right? But I knew who to hang out with, and I knew who not to hang out with, right? And with the books that I was reading at the time, so yeah, of course, the subtle art, the power of now,
Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, and then my favorite one, and this book, literally, I'd say made up my senior years, and I do not take anything back, right? The book is called The 48 Laws of Power.
Oh,
that
Green.
book,
So good.
not only the amount of like knowledge I consumed from that book, like I even referred that book to my essays in high school.
Oh,
My HSC.
really?
Yeah, I referred that, like, because during high school we were learning about human experiences, right? And that book is filled with it. Yes, I was like, all right, boom, there. I know where to put like the 29th law, the plan all the way to the end. Bam, just right there. Like, I was so proud of myself just remembering everything off by heart, right? But that book made up my senior years, right? And even like the start of my junior years, right? And just because knowing how to handle fellow classmates, how to handle people who are like, because back in school, like some people can be like, they lose control over their emotions, yeah? I knew how to sort of go about them, right? I knew where to sort of start, like, let's say, how to talk with people, right? I mean, of course, people who are watching this, they'll probably see that they're like, oh, bro, he was actually onto something, right? But there are some mistakes that I did, and that's why I did in school, because one thing I learned from all of these books was, just have a place where it's your playground, where it's your practice ground. And school was a perfect practice ground for me. So once I graduate from school, I know what to expect from life. What's life going to throw at me, right? But I have so many stories about how that book, 48 Laws of Power, made me enjoy high school a lot more compared to other people.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I have a mate who's now a communication coach who is like traveling all around Southeast Asia, and he just recently got married. And before he turned to faith, that was his Bible. That's what he turned to. He had the normal book as well as like the small pocket book as well.
Yeah.
So if he felt like he was stuck somewhere in his life and he needed advice, he just pulls the book out of his pocket and just have a quick read, just to figure out which law that he needs to follow in that time.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Even like with all the books that I was reading during the time, I started reflecting. I started journaling, right? I think at the start of year 10, when I was in year 10, so that was 2019, gone towards 2020, right? That's when I started journaling, right? And I didn't know how to journal. All I knew is like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to set the goals that I want to set, right? I don't know what to reflect on because I didn't know it was my first time. So I was just like, all right, I want to journal about this. And then after that, I started linking all the books that I was reading. So The Power of Now was one of them. I started linking that book into my journaling. I started to revise on what did I just read? Right? How can I apply this into my life? Right? And I was just writing it down, right? And seeing other ways to go about certain situations, right? Until I read Intelligence by Osho, right? That allowed me to sort of expand my perspective of just life, right? Perspective on certain situations as well. Like, let's say, me being in a position where I'm peer pressured, right? Or being in a position of, let's say, studying for exam, but the exam, like, I didn't study anything about that exam, right? Just knowing what I should be able to do in that situation, as well as being very mindful about some of the things that I say, my intrusive thoughts, right? And just being present with, like, in the classroom or just with people in general, right? And I was able to basically transfer all that knowledge into my journal and just write. I just wrote. And till this day, I still write. So now, after graduating and, being, who I am today, I go back to those journals and I read them and I'm just like, wow, it shocks me, right? Even on the days when, even like till this day, on the days where I feel down, I feel upset, or I feel like I haven't been doing much, or there's some goals that I haven't really achieved, I haven't really put too much effort in, I go back to those journal books and I read them, and it just hearing about these experiences that I've went through, right, back in school, and the way how I was thinking back at school, everything just gushes forth from me, like, just everything sets in place. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm proud of myself, what I did here. Yeah. If Emmanuel was to look at me now and sees me upset, right, he will do his very best to, lighten up my day, right? And I know that for sure. Because he'll be so proud of who I am today. Especially the biggest goal throughout my high school was faith, right? To see that I'm fully engaged within the church, in the community, right? To be up there on the altar as an acolyte, to be by my brother's side when he's celebrating mass, or even the Pauline fathers, right? Being there, I know that for sure. Me in the past, if he was to look at me right now, he'll be so happy.
And that's such an amazing story, and it's awesome to see how much you've grown as well, because I got to see you as a little kid, from what you were saying of you being a troublemaker to you starting to make that shift and seeing you mature. And I remember when I spoke to your brother Gabriel as well as Andreas that you are entrepreneurial now, and I can see that. And I could see you setting yourself up in business and being able to be such an influential people to other people, to support them, to help get the best version of other people. And I didn't know what you were going to do at the time, but now I do, in terms of fitness and whatever you decide to pursue from there on. I can see you can do great things.
Yeah, for sure. And like all of this, all of the things that I'm doing to this today, I wrote it back when I was in high school. Yeah, and I was able to achieve it, and I stuck to my word, and I stuck to that promise that I was going to achieve this, and I did.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get started on mine, but like,
go ahead.
It's quite crazy. So it pretty much happened when I got back from Canada, and I felt pretty lost. And I just remember your brother invited me to this youth camp.
Yep.
Yeah. Antioch. And I just remember going there, meeting amazing people, and yeah, had a great weekend there. And I just started going to church every Sunday. And then 6 months later, I ended up becoming a youth leader for Antioch, and being able to support people in the camp with your sister, Patricia.
Yeah.
And from there, I ended up getting into a relationship, and I slowly got pulled away from going to church. I was put in a toxic relationship where there was a lot of darkness, a lot of fighting, and to the point where this person, I won't mention their name, that was trying to separate me from my parents and my family, and she was quite manipulative. And I just remember a lot of nights I was in darkness. I felt alone. I remember a lot of nights just breaking down in tears. I didn't know what to do with my life, and there were also thoughts of committing suicide. Until like 2 years later, towards the end of the relationship, I knew I had to stand up for myself, because I was just getting pushed around. Because during that time, I was on the verge of stopping wrestling.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking to myself, like, because of what happened on the Olympic trials, that how I missed out on qualifying, I didn't know if it was for me anymore. I was just broken. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm just going to stop wrestling. And I did that. And I didn't know who I was as a person after I was separated from that, because I always knew myself as Justin the athlete.
Yeah.
But I never knew who I was as Justin as a person. So through that time of separating from my sport and being in that toxic relationship was hard times for me.
Yeah.
And I was like a easy target.
You were
Hence,
vulnerable.
I was vulnerable. Hence why I went through a dark path. And then after that relationship ended, I ended up hanging out with friends and started to go clubbing with them. Started going to the strip club from time to time with them when they invited me. And I just remember every time I went, I felt like I wanted to cry, and I didn't know why. I felt like disconnected to my faith as well as myself as a person. I felt like I didn't belong there. And a lot of nights on the way home from the car, I would be saying to myself, there's something missing. I need to change my life, but I just don't know how. And it came down to this verse I found on the Bible the other day, which is so true. And it says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Of the book of Isaiah 5:20.
Yep.
And that made a lot of sense to me, because I was celebrating what I thought was light was in darkness, and I didn't know what light actually was, and hence why I felt separated. And then I started like going to the gym again and started working out. And my sister ended up inviting me to work at UFC gym. And yes, I made like great money doing it, but I still felt pretty lost in that journey. I felt like I just needed to spend more money, and I started to create this urge of jealousy and anger. And I just didn't know why I felt so jealous and angry. Even though I accomplished great things in my sport, it meant nothing to me. And I just disliked a lot of people I was working with, and I was easily ticked off. And I was just wanting to change. Even when I was reading all these self-development books, they were great at the time, and I took a lot of the things, what books you read, 48 Laws of Power, The Subtle Art, Power of Now, and I still felt stuck until the time where towards the end of my personal training journey, I was thinking to myself, I need to change. And I had this urge calling me to go for long drives and go to La Perouse one time. And I just remember sitting on this rock and looking at the moon. And the moon was so bright, it was glaring right on the water. And I was like, God, I ask to you that I feel like I need to change my life. I need to evolve as a person. I feel stuck. I need your help. And I was talking for a good 30 minutes. And I remember I got into the car, and one of my friends called me and says, Justin, I have some great news for you, but I can't tell you here. Let's meet up tomorrow in Parramatta. So literally did that. And when we met up, he wanted to start a podcast. So originally back then, we ended up starting a podcast called Millennial Success, interviewing all these entrepreneurs and learning a lot of their secrets to success just by interviewing them, and just building great like connections through there. Like, it was cool. We got to meet guys like Morgan T. Nelson, Stanley Brown, Paul Flemings, Peter Torden, and all those great guys. And then from there, I ended up going towards Tony Robbins events. And I absorbed as much knowledge as I could. I remember I had posters and I had all his quotes, everything written down to a T. And then I suddenly started to become more like him. So I was acting more like him in everything I say and do, trying to motivate others, trying to help people to get the best version of themselves, right? But until this one day I was catching up with a friend is when I realized I was pretending to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
I was pretending to be Tony Robbins, but I never really stepped into the light of being me, my most authentic self. And having that realization of realizing that I'm not my authentic self, I needed to do a lot of work. So for the next 3 years, I went through an isolation period where I was just trying to discover myself, where I got back into wrestling. I started competing again. And 11 months prior to making the Commonwealth Games, I made the decision that I want to trial for the Commonwealth Games.
Right.
Only in 11 months.
Yeah.
So I ended up training hard 2 to 3 times a day. And then from there, before you knew it, I was qualified. Right. And I competed 11 months later.
Yeah.
Right. And then after that, I just remember during that time of being at the Commonwealth Games, or in the preparations of it, I started feeling a lot of the darkness again. And I felt depressed, and some days in tears, because I felt so isolated and alone. I felt like I did not belong. And I was crushed. And during that time too, I ended up having a minor tear in my adductor like 3 weeks prior to the Commonwealth Games. So I was continuing my training. I was depressed, lost, and I was just trying to figure out myself. And I was just journaling every day, praying every day. And then after the games, like, I didn't get the result I want, but I was just like crushed, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. I remember after that, I ended up like coming back to Sydney after I came back from Germany, And I started praying, like, what do I want to do with myself? And then that's when acting came up. And when I started acting, it was great because I got to meet so many great people like Richard Norton, and some other pretty big actors. And the biggest thing I learned through that was truth, being authentic to yourself. So I had to peel the layers to figure out who I was. And through that process, I started to really know what I wanted and who I needed to be. And also in that process of that, because you need to be able to get into character, especially in some of the darkest moments. So I tend to realize, like, we don't always have our parents with us. And a lot of us are scared because we don't want to visualize that time where we're going to see our parents for the last time, and we don't want to imagine what our last conversation is going to be like. And in acting, I had to put myself in those places.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it was my last time seeing my dad or seeing my mum. What would I say to them?
Yeah.
And it changed my perspective entirely, where I realized I had to spend time with my family and how much I love them. And I realized that they're not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And eventually all these things that we love and cherish, even the materialistic things, are going to turn to dust. They're no longer going to exist in this world. And that's when I started hearing the voice in my heart that I needed to start going back to church and renew my faith. And that's where I kept on hearing on a daily basis when I pray. It's like, you have to come before me so all can be added to you. And obviously I knew that was meant going to church again. And that's exactly what I did. And I started going regularly, and that's where I said I started the 40-day fast.
Yeah.
And I experienced the things I experienced, or I spoke about in the last episode, about seeing him in my dreams in 3 different ways, and also seeing scriptures. And in recent times as well, I just started reading the Bible after actually seeing this verse, which is really got stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
And it says in Matthew 7:21-23, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of the Father in heaven. Many will say to me on the day, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out the demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name?'" And then he says, do you know this one?
No, I don't.
"I do not know you, you evildoers.
Wow.
Vanquish from me." And from that, I started reading the Bible more, because I realized I need to be able to fulfill my actions to the Father and also Jesus through the Son, because only through their will we are guaranteed eternal life. And that's a scary thought when you think about it.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Oh, that's a beautiful, that's a beautiful story to know all this, especially knowing you for a very long time, and all the times that I've seen you, all the times that we hanged out. Especially, I remember going to, I believe, when we went with my brother, me, you, and Andreas. We went to, what's that place called?
Babylon?
Yeah, Babylon. We went to, I think Botany, is it? I don't know. Near the airport.
Oh, Mascot. Brighton Sands?
Yeah, Brighton Sands, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going there, and he seemed very fine, and he seemed alright, but now knowing all this, it's just like, wow, it just seemed like going deep into the inside of, into your life, and just in someone's life in general, like knowing that, everyone has their own problems, right? One thing that I actually really like what you said was during the time where you let go of wrestling, right? Take wrestling away from you. Who are you, right? And that's when you felt lost, right? And I can definitely relate to that time where when I was going through my self-development journey, right? I was thinking, because at the time I was playing soccer and I was so invested into soccer, right? All I know was soccer. Take soccer away from me, who am I, right? Or am I just this skinny kid? Am I just this kid that's just, goes to school and just, does reading, nerd, whatever, yeah. And that's when I actually thought about it, I reflected on it, I journaled it. I'm like, who am I without soccer? Who am I without these certain people? Who am I without this? And that's when I started to work on my own talents. I started learning how to play the piano. I started learning calisthenics, right? I started to learn how to sort of get along with my teachers, right? Because back then I thought my teachers were my biggest threats, my biggest enemy. No,
yeah, I bet.
But not anymore. I was able to talk to my teachers in a, not as a student and teacher, as try to make it as if I was building friendships, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you said about what you said about having wrestling, and you completely let go of wrestling, and you had to look at yourself, who are you? And I could definitely understand that and understand that feeling, right? It actually made me tear up just to know that it almost feels like you're just like a nobody.
Yeah, and we are at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yes.
Accomplish many things, but at the end of the day, we're nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just
to us. We always gotta show a little bit of gratitude of what we've able to achieve and what goals that we were able to set, right? Even till this day, like the purpose that we're trying to fulfill, right? Just be grateful about, you're able to do this. Some people can't even do these things, right? But yeah, and another thing that you mentioned was going through darkness, right? And I'm sure everyone can relate to this, right? And my experience of darkness, I never really experienced darkness during high school. It was actually last year. Last year was probably the darkest time of my life, right? And during that time was when I lost basically almost everything, right? I wouldn't say almost everything, but to me, it meant something. So I lost not only my license, I lost about $15,000 because of fines and, paying off a whole bunch of things, right? I lost my job. And that's when I started that PT business, right? And, just during that time, I was miserable, right? I was miserable. And during the time when I lost my license, it was 3 months. It was supposed to be 9 months, but I was able to, when I went to court, I was able to bring it down to 3. Because I was on my Ps, my green Ps, so you're supposed to have 7 demerit points. I lost 16 altogether.
Really?
Yeah, I messed up. I messed up, yeah. I've upset a lot of people because of my mistakes, right? And that was like a life lesson for me, and just it was basically a slap to the face. Bam, So that whole period throughout last year, 3 months, was during the winter time, right? So, as you know, when I lost my license, right, I had no transport whatsoever. The only transport I had was my bike. And when I looked at my bike, it took me back to the days where I was bike riding around during the first lockdown in Sydney. I think it was in 2020. And it gave me a sort of bit of nostalgia of just doing this and just a bit of joy. But until I started that PT job, when I had my client at 5 a.m., I had to wake up at 4 o'clock and get the bike ready, start bike riding all the way to the gym, yeah, in the cold. One time it went over until 2 degrees, and my hands were purple.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, so I thought me saying to myself I'm alright, but really, man,
it's freezing.
It's freezing. I was trying not to, even in the times where I felt upset, I was trying not to cry. As I'm bike riding, I'm trying not to cry because I'm suffering. I'm genuinely suffering, right? I was making barely anything, right? No money, right? And this is the client that I need in order to pay my rent. Pay anything,
I can imagine.
Just oh, bro, I need this. I need to be there, right? I can't lose him. But that time right there was, it was dark, right? And one verse that was like I was reading, right? I'll pull it up. Let me just get it up real quick. It's a verse that really touched my heart, and this verse I knew it since lockdown as well, but once I read it again, that's when everything starts to like sit with me. So the verse is, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light."
That is very
Isaiah
true.
9:2, right? And because of that, I was going through a dark period of time, yeah. But I know what I saw, especially when I was like young.
Yeah,
Especially as
100% you would
as a
have.
15-year-old, I knew what the light was, right? So going through this dark time, it's like that one quote from Winston Churchill: "If you're going through hell, keep going," right? Because once you get out of hell,
You start to
know,
see light.
you start to see light, right? So that's what I was thinking, and just being put into that situation where I was suffering. I had basically, another thing, I didn't go to uni because I lost my license.
That's right. I remember you were studying at that
I
time.
was studying, and I couldn't go uni. I couldn't do anything, right? And it was so hard. Like one time, I tried to catch the bus to go to uni. I missed the bus. I went on the bus, and I went to the stop that I had to switch to a different bus. Yeah, I come out, and the bus just going, and I was like, bro, I walked home from there. It was like an hour and a half walk.
That was a long walk.
I was so pissed. I couldn't just man, I was so upset.
I can imagine so.
So that verse right there I was able to see like far ahead after this, that period of suffering, right? It was such a messed up time, and then of course I lost whole heaps of money, right? I had to pay off fines, and then as well as I got into a few car accidents after I got my license back, and that just basically ripped off my bank account, and I was so upset. But after all of that, that's when the light started to settle in, right? And that's when I was able to really trust in my faith, to really have my faith as the core of everything, right? I remember one of my confessions that I said to the priest was, I confessed my sins because I was blaming God for everything. I blame God, I do these things, I come to church, I try to inspire as many people, I stay true to you, Lord. Why have you sort of given up on me? Why am I going through these?
It's like the why
sufferings?
me.
Yeah, it was like when Jesus dies on the cross. It's like, why have you forsaken me? That's what.
Yeah.
But that's what I was saying, and I was pretty upset. And I said that in my confession, and these things, that happens in our lives. One thing I learnt was, God gives his toughest battles to his strongest warriors.
100%.
And that's what my priest said. And that changed my perspective from like, wow.
I can relate to that 100% because I know the time back in 2012 when I done everything I needed to do and I was winning all the selections to make the Olympic Games, and even the wrestling president of Australia already bought tickets for my weight division. A lot of the people in the other countries believed I was going to make the Olympics at that time, and I ended up winning the gold medal at the Oceanias. And that same day, my girlfriend broke up with me, like my first ever girlfriend. And I felt lost and confused. And I didn't know at the time if I was going to travel back to Canada, that it was off season. So it was no training. And in that time, I was spending a month there, lost, knowing that we ended up breaking up for good when we were in Canada. I was just stuck in my thoughts. I was lost again in darkness. And I just remember competing at Morocco for the Olympic Games and Olympic Game trials. Let me reword that.
I was going to say
Olympic Games trials. And I ended up having no strength. It's like I had all my strength literally taken away from me. Yeah. And that was probably one of the worst performances I ever had. And I remember after I lost my last match, I was in tears in a dark room, throwing tables and chairs, swearing to God, why have you done this to me? How could you? Saying every word under the sun. And it's not only till years later, a decade later, I truly got to understand why he set me on that path.
Yeah.
Why he's putting me in this direction now. Was never about me. It never was. It's obviously about putting him first, but also inspiring the future generation of people.
Oh, 100%, yes.
Because the knowledge I've gained through the years of wrestling, the years of traveling to 30 plus different countries for it, I can help fast track the newer generation to help create future generation of Olympic athletes. And now I'm going through that phase where I'm giving back. It's one of the most amazing feelings that I'm experiencing right now. And just one more thing I'd like to bring up as well is like when I was going through the 40 days of fasting, one of the biggest things two of the biggest things I realized during the fasting period, one, I got to experience people struggling overseas in Africa and people who are struggling in the war where they're just hungry for food and not being able to eat.
Yeah.
As well as how entitled we actually are. We believe we're so entitled to things, it's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Where in life, we're not entitled for anything.
Yeah.
No one owes us anything. And we create our own luck in God's will.
100%, yeah. No, that's pretty beautiful what you said as well. When you're relating to what I just said about God gives his toughest battles to the strongest warriors, right? And especially how you literally in that dark room you cried, you yelled, right? That that reminds me of, it's not an experience that I went through, but one of the stories that I kept on listening to, especially back in high school, was an athlete. His name's Inky Johnson, and Inky Johnson is an NFL athlete, right? NFL player. So he came out of like from the struggle. Like I'm talking about, he lived in a one room apartment with 10 other people, right? And his dad, wasn't there in his life until he asked him to be there in order for him to train to get into the NFL, right? And he trained with his father, yeah. And that was like, he built that bond with his father when his father wanted to separate him from him, yeah. He built that bond, right? He trained all, throughout his, teenage years. He trained, right? Until he made it into like, he got scouted into, a very good, like a decent team, yeah. And from there, he grew up from there until he was able to sign a contract a deal to get into the NFL. In order for him to get into the NFL, he had to play these 10 games, right? He just had to play these 10 games, right? And, just listening back from how he went from nothing to now playing 10 games, and then he'll make it to the NFL, like that there was, like the struggle from that. But this is where the story begins. Until he played his first game, he did really well. Yeah, his second game he did very well. The third game, that's his I think that's his third game. Yeah, 7 more games left. Right, that third game changed everything.
Wow.
So he was playing on the field, right? He's running, yeah, and he does this. He does an outstanding tackle. He takes the ball off the opposite team. Yeah. He does this magnificent tackle. Bam! Right? Lands on the floor, right? And then, like, everyone's all cheering in the crowd. Yeah. His teammates come up to him. He's like, all right, yeah, that's it, boy. Inky, yeah, let's get it, man. Yeah. And Arthur's like, yeah, man, yeah. And then he tries to get up, right? And he couldn't get up.
Wow.
Right? His teammates was like, listen, Inky, Mary, come on, let's get up, let's go. He's like, bro, I can't move, right? What happened was, his whole left side, I think it's his left side of his arm, right, was basically paralyzed.
Wow.
From that tackle, right? And during that time, they called all the refs, the coaches, yeah, and they had to pick him up on a spinal board, right? Get him out of the game, right? And his father went up to him when he was in hospital, right? And he said, like, Inky, you really did it, man. You really did it. Yeah, saying, like, implying, like, he was about to get into the NFL, but he was injured, right? The doctor, he went to proceed to his surgery, right? Until they figured out what the cause is and why his arms are paralyzed, right? They started, they were stressed. They started rushing around the hospital, right? And so, like, everybody, come here. This man is about to die. And listen, hearing that, when he's like, him explaining this, when hearing that, it broke him. It was like, man, I'm about, you're right next to me, doctor. Why are you going to say I'm about to die? This isn't something I want to hear. So the option was for him, it's either he lose his, I think he's either his left or right, one of his legs. One of his legs, either lose one of his legs, so having all feeling in his legs, moving his leg, right, or losing his arm, right? They had to replace like a certain, they had to do a surgery in order for him to stay alive, right? So he said, take the arm, right? And now his arm's like, it's paralyzed, he can't move it, And during that time, he was saying, God, I had 7 games left. I could have made it in the NFL. Why couldn't you just say, let me make it to the NFL and then, give me this injury? Like, I wanted to make it to the NFL. But God said to him, like, no, you have to go through this path. This is the path that you need to go to, yeah? And because of that, because he went through this path, right, he understood, he realized, like, why he needed to go through this path. Is to inspire the future generations of NFL players.
That's amazing.
Right? And that story, I kept on, like, it was like a full 1 hour, like, talk of him, like, giving to, like, a whole conference, right? Listening to that, I was listening to it when I was in high school, listening it during last year when I was going through, like, some rough times. That sort of reminded me of sort of what you just went through.
Yeah, no, that's like a beautiful way to actually finish off the episode too. Like, sometimes we perceive a certain path as our dreams, right? But what God envisions for us can be something completely different.
100%, yes.
So if you're going through dark times right now, understand those times will pass as long as you're willing to seek help from God and through the people around you, especially the ones that love you most, like your parents, your family, 100%. Your closest friends that are willing to go through the dark times with you. Anything is possible. It's just being able to have faith and trust that everything's going to work out according to plan. Anyways, I thank you for tuning into this episode. Make sure you leave a good review, and until next time, we're off.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Whew. Yeah.